We are now 266 days away from the midterms. And today, lawmakers were supposed to be able to go look at the unredacted version of the newly released Epstein documents. But multiple lawmakers who went to review those documents say some of the text is still blacked out with no explanation as to why. Here's what Congressman Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna said about what they saw today.
What I saw that bothered me were the names of at least 6 men that have been redacted that are likely incriminated by their inclusion in these files.
There are 6 men, some of them with their photographs, that have been redacted, and there's no explanation why those people were redacted.
What we're after is the men who Jeffrey Epstein trafficked women to. We want those names published. We're not out to embarrass people. And the problem is we went in there hoping to see that in 302 forms. What we found out is those 302 forms were redacted before they got to the DOJ. At least one is a U.S. citizen. At least one is a foreigner. And the other 3 or 4 have names. I'm not sure if they're foreign or U.S.
In which field do they work in? Is it finance, banking, political?
One is pretty high up in the foreign government.
And some are, they're, one of the others is a pretty prominent individual.
Pretty prominent individual. Why were these names redacted? This was also the day Epstein co-conspirator, there she is on your screen, Ghislaine Maxwell, sat for a deposition with House Oversight Committee. No surprise, she invoked her Fifth Amendment right and declined to answer any questions. Watch this.
Ms. Maxwell, were you a close friend and confidant of Jeffrey Epstein?
I would like to answer your question, but on the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer this question and any related questions. My habeas petition is pending in the Southern District of New York. I therefore invoke my right to silence under the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution.
Her attorneys say she will testify if and only if President Trump grants her clemency. When MS Now asked the White House about this, the press office referred us to previous comments from Trump and Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, saying the president is not thinking about granting that clemency. Today, the family of the late Virginia Giuffre, a victim of Jeffrey Epstein, released a letter directed directly at Maxwell. They ended the letter with Virginia's last wishes for Maxwell. Quote, Ghislaine, you deserve to spend the rest of your life in a jail cell, trapped in a cage forever, like you trapped your victims. When it comes to Ghislaine Maxwell, it looks like her attorneys are now asking very powerful people to make a choice between truth and justice. They can either let her escape justice and hear the truth, or keep her behind bars as she keeps her mouth shut. One or the other. But here's something very important to remember. Just 4 years ago, DOJ prosecutors said she engaged in a pattern of dishonest conduct, that she lied repeatedly about her crimes. Even Trump very close allies like Mike Johnson and Todd Blanche have openly questioned whether her testimony would even be reliable. So the choice her attorneys want people to make seems like a pretty easy one. And the White House keeps saying that Trump is not thinking about giving her clemency. But here's a very important thing. We all know that what Donald Trump says one day does not matter at all. He could change his mind at any moment. So even if he ruled out giving Maxwell clemency, there is no way to know that for sure until Trump leaves the White House. And when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein himself, there are still so many questions, not just about the scope of the terrible things he did, but about the network of people who remained in touch with him after his 2008 conviction. How did he become so wealthy? How did his network become so big? And was there any indication that extortion played a part? As the New York Times reported, Epstein drafted letters to very powerful men where he hinted at some kind of shared secrets. These are crucial questions, and they are not going away, no matter what Donald Trump or any of these very powerful redacted men, redacted names, no matter what they say. With that, let's get smarter with the help of our leadoff panel tonight. Luke Broadwater is here, Pulitzer Prize-winning White House correspondent for The New York Times. Leanne Caldwell, chief correspondent for Puck, and Susan Glasser, staff writer for The New Yorker. Okey doke. Leanne, today Jamie Raskin said in the files he saw a reference to a girl as young as 9 years old. Tonight, Republican Senator Cynthia Lummis told Midas Touch that very development changed her mind. Initially, she did not see what a big deal it was to see the Epstein files. She said they could move on. Now she says it's hugely important. What else are you hearing from your sources on the Hill?
Yeah, so Steph, it's that exact thing that when people actually dig into this and hear the details and read some of this, that it really becomes apparent at how horrific, how terrible, how disgusting all of this is. Because for so long, people who weren't really involved or caring much about the Epstein files, knowing very little, it was just a distance thing over there. But the thing is that now that people are being able to see some of these dynamics, some of the emails that go back and forth, and some of these details, it's absolutely horrifying. And it goes back to what some of these Republicans, including Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is no longer in Congress, and a few other Republicans were saying that why this is so necessary. Now you have on Capitol Hill, you have a lot more people, mostly Democrats, but who are really anxious to get to a lot more of this information. You have members of Congress today, Thomas Massie, Ro Khanna, who said that there are still so many questions, even though they went to the Justice Department to have more access than what was released to Congress. They said the redactions are still unacceptable. There's too many, and that the Justice Department is not still following the law, Steph.
Lauren Boebert was asked by a reporter. She said she thinks after seeing what she saw today, and she's going back tomorrow, Maxwell should have a longer prison sentence. Susan, we just heard sound from Thomas Massie talking about the names of 6 men that were redacted. There are so many unanswered questions about Jeffrey Epstein's network of powerful men. How much faith do you have in this environment with so much going on every day we're going to get any kind of answers?
Yeah, Steph, I think that's really the question here. We're in a situation in Washington where the functioning of accountability has broken down. And I think that's why you're seeing this sort of exceptional thing of Congress passing a law demanding the release of these documents at the same time that you don't have a functioning Republican committees in either the House or the Senate working to exercise oversight really in a meaningful way over the executive branch of Donald Trump. You have the Justice Department of Trump and the FBI taken over and politicized. And, you know, look at the contrast between what's happening here in the United States, where we have reporters talking about this, we have individual members of Congress. But as far as we can tell, we don't know that there's any investigative process to look at this. Whereas the political scandal unleashed by Congress releasing these documents, the accountability seems to be happening in places like Great Britain, where it's a bigger scandal for the Prime Minister of Great Britain, who never even met Jeffrey Epstein, than it is for Donald Trump, the president of the United States, who's all over these documents. And I think, you know, people would be well advised to sort of take a breath and say, how is it possible? We have a sitting Commerce Secretary here who was apparently in business with Jeffrey Epstein, despite having lied and said that he had nothing to do with him. And where are the Republicans calling for him to resign? Where is the investigation of that relationship? And, you know, so it just, to me, it's really a sign of the breakdown in Washington.
But that example in the UK, Susan, is there only one difference? Like, why is the UK treating this different than the United States? Well, one reason, Donald John Trump, isn't that?
Well, if only it were just one man, but at this point, it's a broken system, Steph, in addition to
I know, but I'm saying Donald John Trump
right?
protecting.
Where's the Justice Department? Where's the Justice Department functioning right now? In Donald Trump's first term, there was still the possibility of investigations, but Trump has taken out the public integrity section of the Justice Department. He's turned the FBI into an immigration enforcement agency. According to great reporting for the New York Times recently, 20% of FBI agents have been redirected to immigration functions. Our system isn't working because of Donald Trump's election and what he's done to the executive branch. But, you know, there's a lot of people in our system who are not doing the jobs that they're supposed to do, and not just the president.
All right, well, let's talk about somebody else in his administration, Luke. Howard Lutnick. Several lawmakers are calling for Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, to resign over his appearances in the Epstein files. And I want to be clear, he is not accused of any criminal wrongdoing. The White House is standing behind him. Is it because they really believe in him or his case? Or is it because they're just never giving in? I spoke to a very senior person in the business community today who just said, no, they don't want to set precedent. We still have millions of pages we have not seen. And if they punt Lutnick, what will that mean for others? And the comparison they gave is, well, there's a medical contributor that CBS didn't get rid of, and they doubt CBS cares about that medical contributor. But given the millions of pages we haven't seen, if they punt somebody at that level and then a bigger fish ends up named, then they're in quite a pickle.
Yeah, I think your contact is right on the logic and the reasoning there. I mean, Howard Lutnick may not have been exposed as abusing anyone or doing anything illegal in these files, but his public statements were exposed to be not true. He said that he had one interaction with Jeffrey Epstein, and that was it, one and done, he said. And then you see years later, he's actually in business with Epstein. And years later, there's talk of him visiting him at the island, and his name comes up again and again in the files. And so, their interactions were more robust, and he did have more ties to Epstein than he let the public to believe. And what else came out today is that Donald Trump apparently also has made statements that contradict evidence within the files. He and his press secretary have said he threw Jeffrey Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago. And there's evidence in the files, according to Jamie Raskin, who read them today, that that's not true, that Epstein was never thrown out of Mar-a-Lago. So, if we're going to, I think in the administration's view, if you're going to start firing people or throwing people out of government because they lied about Jeffrey Epstein, well, you might have to start looking all the way to the top. So, yes, there's a lot of information coming out, and a lot of people in the Trump administration and elsewhere are being exposed for having much closer ties to Jeffrey Epstein than they have said publicly.